Chapter 7, The Owl. Jeremy appeared as promised when the last thumbnail of sun winked out over the mountains beyond the meadow. Mrs. Frisby was waiting, her heart pounding in her ears, and 3 of the children were there to watch. Teresa and Martin, standing beside their mother, and Cynthia, who was afraid of the crow, just a pair of round eyes peering out the round doorway. Timothy was down below, taking a nap, and had not been told about the expedition, lest he worry and blame himself for the risk his mother must take. Indeed, the words "moving day" had not been mentioned in his presence. Even to the other children, Mrs. Frisby had explained only a part of the problem. That is, she had not told them that there were only 5 days left, nor anything about Mr. Fitzgibbon and the tractor. She did not want them to worry either. Jeremy landed with a swoosh, a bit dramatically, perhaps, and nodded at the children and Mrs. Frisby. "Hello," he said. "Here I am." Mrs. Frisby introduced Martin and Teresa, and Cynthia's eyes. Martin, who wished he were going on the trip himself, asked Jeremy in excitement, "How high can you fly?" "Oh, I don't know exactly," Jeremy said. "A couple of miles, I guess." "Mother, did you hear? You'll be 2 miles up in the sky." "Martin, it won't be necessary to go so high on this trip," Jeremy said cheerfully. "No, but I can if you'd like." "No, thank you. I wouldn't think of taking the trouble." She was trying hard to hide the terror, and Martin had not helped matters at all. But Jeremy suddenly saw that she was trembling and realized that she must be afraid. "It's all right," he said kindly. "There's nothing to be nervous about. I fly over the woods a dozen times a day." "Yes," thought Mrs. Frisby, "but you're not riding on your back, and you can't fly off." "All right," she said as bravely as she could. "I'm ready. Teresa and Martin, take care of Timothy until I come back, and be sure you don't tell him where I've gone." With a small leap, she was on Jeremy's back, lying as flat as she could, and holding tight to the glossy feathers between his wings, as a horseback rider grips the horse's mane before a jump. Martin and Teresa waved goodbye, but she did not see them, for she had her face pressed against the feathers and her eyes closed. Once again she felt the surge of power as the crow's broad wings beat down against the air. This time it lasted longer, for they were going higher than before. Then the beating became gentler as they leveled off, and then, to her alarm, it stopped altogether. What was wrong? The crow must have felt her grow tense, for suddenly, from ahead, she heard his voice. "An updraft," he said. "We're soaring." There's usually one over this stretch of woods in the evening. A current of warm air, rising from the woods, was carrying them along. So smooth was the motion that they seemed to stand still, and Mrs. Frisby ventured to open her eyes and lift her head just a trifle. She could not look straight down. That was Jeremy's back, but off to the right and a bit behind them she saw a gray-brown square the size of a postage stamp. She realized, with a gasp, that it was the garden patch, and Martin and Teresa, if they were still there, were too small to be seen. "Look to the left," said Jeremy, who was watching her over his shoulder. She did, and saw what looked like a wide, fearsome snake, blue-green in color, coiling through the woods. "What is it?" she asked in wonder. "You really don't know? It's the river." "Oh," said Mrs. Frisby, rather ashamed of her ignorance. She had heard of the river, of course, but had not known that it looked like a snake. She had never been there, since to reach it one had to cross the entire width of the forest. There were advantages of being a bird. In a minute more, they had left the updraft, and Jeremy's wings resumed pumping. They went higher, and Mrs. Frisby closed her eyes again. When she opened them, the garden patch had vanished far behind them, and Jeremy, searching the trees below, began a long, slanting descent. Eventually, as he banked sharply, Mrs. Frisby saw off his wing-tip a gray-brown patch among a stand of tall green pines. From so high it looked like a gnarled gray bush. But as they circled lower, she could see that it was in fact an enormous tree, leafless, skeletal, and partly dead. One huge branch had recently broken off and fallen, and 3 pine trunks lay bent double under its weight. It was a gloomy and primeval spot, deeply shadowed in the gray dusk.
Teachers, may I have your attention, please? Earlier in the week, I